Hello, I'm Sarah Barth, Executive Director of Semper Virens Fund. Thank you for joining us in our Under the Redwoods webinar series, in which we explore the beauty, history, mystery, and science of redwoods, all things redwoods, it seems. I want to thank especially Scharf Investments for sponsoring this year's Under the Redwoods webinar series. We really appreciate their support. Dr. Suzanne Bartlett Hackenmiller is a human in nature health expert, and you may have seen one of her earlier presentations with us when she joined us in 2022 to talk about forest bathing, which was a really fun webinar, and I encourage you to check it out if you didn't see it when it appeared originally. Dr. Suzanne Bartlett Hackenmiller is an integrative medical professional, and she is the Chief Medical Advisor of All Trails and lead physician at Chopra Health Retreats. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Suzanne Bartlett Hackenmiller so we can talk about some of the new and interesting ways that people are trying to reconnect with nature, get out and enjoy nature. This should be a really fun session. So welcome, Dr. Hackenmiller.
Hello, Sarah. Thank you so much. It's great to be back with you guys again.
We're glad to have you.
Thank you. We're going to have so much fun talking about this very lighthearted, I think, topic. So we'll get started here. See if my notes work. There we go. Awesome. So actually, this was a photo taken in your neck of the woods back in April when my husband and I visited. So we'll just start that. But when Matt Schaefer and I were talking about what we would talk about for this talk, we discussed the various ways in which I prescribe nature, and then also the way in which people are taking trail prescriptions and nature walks in new directions. So I thought I would start by talking a little bit about some of the things that I have been doing for the last 10 or so years related to prescribing nature. As you can see here on the left, got a couple of different forest bathing activities. There's a barefoot walk there in the upper left. There's a group in the middle that was a while back, forest bathing on a paved trail with people who used wheelchairs. The lower left there is one of the many conferences that I have spoken at. I do quite a bit of presenting at medical conferences about the health benefits of nature. And then on the right there is a little pet project of mine that we completed about 1.5 years ago, a Trail RX program at a nature center in Iowa, where we looked at 5 different trails, and we created both a physical health prescription and a mental health prescription for each of the 5 different trails. And so for the physical health prescription, I looked at the distance of the trail and the elevation change, and then calculated the calories burned and the METs, or metabolic equivalent of task, that a person would use if they walked, jogged, or ran each of these different trails. And then we combined a number of different studies, the research that supports the health benefits of using the trail in this way. And then for our mental health prescription, we created a forest bathing invitation that we recorded, and people are able to access that recording by using QR codes that are affixed to signage along these 5 different trails. So for example, they could stop at a bench, use their cell phone to scan a QR code that would then take them to a recording that's something like a guided meditation or a guided imagery of me walking them through taking nature in through the senses. And then again, we combined some of the research, showcased some of that talks about how this particular activity of forest bathing is beneficial to mental health. So gosh, I've spent the last number of years doing so many different ways of prescribing nature, including Walk with a Doc, which is a great organization where I would invite people monthly to come out and walk with me outdoors. And I would always say, you get an hour of free medical advice. You just have to come out and walk. So, yeah, so we decided we're going to talk about trail trends and why they're good for you. And if you think about it, we discussed the many ways that people are receiving information these days. Social media, the world of social media. And of course, we all know that there are pros and cons to using social media, but I do think it can be interesting to contemplate this topic through this lens, no pun intended, of social media. So I wanted to backtrack a little bit here first and talk about what I would consider kind of some traditional hiking ideas. And this is my own little brainstorm. So I urge you that if you come up with some other ideas, that you drop those in the chat, because there's just no end to the different ways that we can use trails. So, hiking with kids, going on a scavenger hunt, starting out maybe with an idea before you go, a list of things you and or your kids, and you can do this without kids. I do it sometimes. Things that you would like to see if you can find along the trail. And of course, we practice leave no trace and leave things behind, but it can be fun to kind of heighten our awareness by seeking particular items in nature. Foraging is something that I know a lot of people do, looking for mushrooms and things. Of course, you always need to have permission before foraging in nature, and also be 110% sure you know what you're foraging for, and never eat anything that you don't 100% know is safe to be eaten. Landmark seeking, I'll talk a bit more about this in a little bit. Heading out with the goal of looking at fall leaves at this time maybe, or in the spring looking for wildflowers or other seasonal types of flora. I love the spring and looking at different kinds of wildflowers and following the same trail maybe week after week and just seeing how the flora changes over time. One of my very favorites is the coffee hike. I'll talk a bit more about that in a moment. Bird watching, hiking with your pet, picking up litter, the walking moai. I'll explain that in a moment. And then forest bathing, which, as you recall, we did a year or so ago. Now then, the trail trends on social media. Curious if any of you have happened to notice some of these trends on social media. Maybe if you're on TikTok or Instagram. Anybody this summer hear about the hot girl walk? That was a big one for quite a while. Talk a bit more about these in a little bit here. Speed hiking was one, and then soon after it was followed by soft hiking and silent hiking and sense hacking. And then last but not least, rage hiking. So I'll share a little bit more about what those things are as we go here. So we'll start with our kind of more traditional trail prescriptions. Hiking with kids. I just think that it's fun to go out in nature with kids and just to follow their lead, because their curiosity just takes them all over the place. They're constantly looking up, looking down, looking under things, finding new perspectives and different ways of finding things, and just taking their lead and slowing down and remaining curious as a child. If you don't have a kid to take out with you, you might think about just channeling your inner child. Sometimes I'll go out with a magnifying glass or a small little compact mirror, and things like that can allow you to notice things from different angles, different perspectives, and just kind of play with little devices like that and see what you see. Of course, nature identification can be fun, going out with a guide to see what you see in terms of plants or flowers or animals or insects. And going with a guide certainly can be a very educational and inspirational experience. This became one of my favorite kinds of hikes during COVID, during the early summer months of 2020. When I think everybody was bored out of their mind and we knew that we could be outdoors safely. So I started seeking out landmarks. I discovered that the DNR in really every state has directories of large trees. Did anyone know that? And so they have varying levels of helpfulness in terms of finding these trees, but that can be some of the fun and challenge. I found that many of them are in cemeteries. As you can see, this great big swamp oak I found was in a cemetery. But you might find that it's fun to just Google your area, large trees in your area, and see what comes up. It's shocking that this exists. You might also, for other landmarks, seek out water features, waterfalls. Sometimes you might be surprised to realize that there are features like this that you never even knew existed in your location. Maybe things like archaeological sites, things like that. Here's another one I found during COVID. I discovered in Iowa that there is the White Pine Hollow State Forest, and this was one of my COVID quests. And this is my family, because I dragged them on my quest as well. Discovered that there's this white pine forest that's one of the only natural white pine forests west of the Mississippi. And we found this enormous white pine that had these 4 different trunks, and it was just crazy. Not very easy to find, really off the beaten path. The trails were completely overgrown, as you can see here, but it became a huge adventure for my family on this very boring day in the middle of COVID. So fall leaves right now in some parts of the country, it's a great time to go explore fall leaves. In the spring, like I said, exploring different kinds of wildflowers can be fun. But if you think about the seasons, can be inspirational for different types of hikes. Certainly in North America, we're going into cold and flu season. And studies have found that people who undergo regular physical activity, moderate exercise, have a lower risk of upper respiratory infections. And moderate exercise actually boosts the immune system. So taking that outdoors has additional benefits, of course, because of things like getting vitamin D from the sun. When I also think about seasonal types of hikes and walks, I think about even diurnal or during different times of day types of walks. This time of year, of course, it gets darker earlier and stays darker earlier in the morning, which sometimes people think makes it difficult to get outdoors. But I would argue that, invest in a little headlamp, some reflective clothing and things, and go out for an evening hike. Actually having exposure to the dark and being outdoors in the dark allows for our natural melatonin to rise in the body, and that helps us to sleep. So spending time outdoors in the dark can improve your sleep. And that's something that I certainly talk with patients about on a daily basis, is problems with sleep. And this is an intervention that's free, that's non-pharmaceutical, and just really good for you in so many different ways. And then of course, I'm also thinking about upcoming holidays. And it's interesting to know that if you plan to take a walk or a hike after a big meal, say Thanksgiving or Christmas or any of the fall and winter holidays coming up, that getting out for a walk directly after a meal has been found to lower blood glucose better than at any other time related to a meal. So it's been found that getting out right after a meal and walking will reduce the spikes in glucose, and also will help you kind of avoid that post-meal slump. So that's something I've been doing with my family for years and years and years, is just factoring a nature walk, a walk outdoors, or a hike after big holiday meals. It's something fun to do, kind of gets us all up and moving, and it's just a fun tradition to add. All right, I said before, the coffee hike is one of my favorites. My husband and I take coffee out on our morning hikes several times a week. You think about the time in the morning that many people spend sitting and having coffee, maybe before they start their day. We like the idea of double timing and having our coffee as we walk sometimes. Many people during the winter start to experience seasonal affective disorder, which is kind of a slumping in mental health, some depression. And we know that that's related to the fact that we have shorter days, less exposure to the sun during the winter. An interesting recent study found that when patients who experience seasonal affective disorder were treated, don't you love that? Were treated with a 1 hour daily walk outdoors in the morning, their depression score decreased by 50% after just 1 week of getting this regular physical activity outdoors. And that was compared to the control group who just had natural light exposure as opposed to getting outdoors and walking. So the control group had only a 25% improvement in their depression score, as opposed to the 50% reduction in those who got outdoors for a morning walk each day. So good prescription for you. And I love that they called that their treatment, a walk outdoors, with or without coffee. So bird watching, there have been a number of studies that have looked at the health benefits of bird watching. I just love that picture of the owl, so I had to include it. It's so cute. But a recent study just this year in 2023 found that it was a study of people who were nursing home residents, and it found that regular bird watching maintained their cognitive resources, their mobility, and boosted their, as they called it, biopsychosocial health. So in other words, physical health, their psychological health, and their social interactions. And we know that loneliness is an epidemic at the moment, as they're calling it. And so anything that can help to combat loneliness is important. So think about that bird watching, cognitive resources, mobility, and biopsychosocial health all get a boost from bird watching. Hiking with your pet. This is a favorite. You know, everybody loves to walk their dogs. You know, walking your dog obviously has health benefits for the dog. It's good for them physically, it's good for them socially, it's good for them to be exposed to different sights and sounds and smells, and just to be stimulated in that way. And studies have found that people are more likely to walk when they have a dog to walk for. And it's almost as if they're more likely to walk for the health benefits of their pet sometimes than they are for their own health benefits. And so, okay, we roll with that. I have recommended dog walking to many patients, because even if you'll only do it to benefit the health of your dog, if it happens to help you as well, that's an added bonus. They found in studies that having a dog and walking a dog actually increases the repetitiveness of exercise in people who walk their dogs. And probably because of it, it's kind of a healthy sense of obligation. So again, if that's what it takes, fantastic. Studies have also found that dog walking, people who walk their dogs are more likely to interact with other people, which I think is absolutely true. It's hard to walk past a dog and not interact with the dog and its owner. So that helps with social interaction, it helps with creating community, and again, combats that social isolation and loneliness. And we know, again, social isolation and loneliness are linked with a whole host of mental and physical ailments. Another kind of hike I often take is the litter hike. Sometimes I go out with that in mind, that I'm going to take a bunch of garbage bags, and that's the primary focus of my walk, is to pick up litter. And of course, we know why that's important. Healthy environment, healthy people. Sarah alluded to that in her opening. Another thing I will often do is just stick one of these grocery bags in my pocket. I might not be going out specifically with the goal of picking up litter, but it never fails. You happen to see something sometimes on your walk that you would like to pick up and throw away in a more appropriate receptacle. And so just having a bag in your pocket makes it an option to do that. The walking moai. It's not a great photo in terms of resolution, but the walking moai, anybody heard of the walking moai? So the walking moai is a term that I believe was coined by the Blue Zones Initiative. And you may be aware that the blue zones of the world are the 5 places around the world where people have been found to live to be 100 more than any place else in the world. And there's one in Costa Rica, there's one in Italy, one in Greece, one in Loma Linda, California, and one in Japan. And so they've identified the things that people do in these blue zones of the world that allow them to live so long. And they have 4 main similarities that they've identified that are related to this longevity. One is that they all have diets that are considered anti-inflammatory. And of course, this is another entire presentation that we could delve into, and we won't today, but they have anti-inflammatory diets. They have active lifestyles. They all have a spirituality practice, and they all have a strong sense of community. So this notion in the blue zones of a walking moai contributes to a couple of those different features. So community and activity. And so the idea is that you might create a moai, a small group of friends where you get together on a regular basis, maybe daily, maybe weekly, to walk together, to walk and talk and chat. Studies have found that being outdoors in nature and walking in nature has a number of different effects and benefits on memory and cognition. One study found that a 20-minute walk in either an urban or a green space had significant benefits to short-term memory, reduction of tension, depression, anger, and fatigue. So many good reasons to get outdoors and walk with others or by yourself. And we also know that depression has been found to speed the process of memory decline in older adults. And so again, opt outdoors for some mental and physical and cognitive health. We talked about this before. I think the link has already been shown. We can maybe pop it up there again. Just wanted to briefly mention forest bathing, and this is a still shot from the forest bathing virtual event that we did about 1.5 years ago with Sempervirens Fund. And if you haven't seen that, I invite you to check it out and watch our webinar and this virtual forest bathing in the Redwoods. I actually, speaking of nature prescriptions, I give this link to my patients on a regular basis so that they can have a virtual experience of being out in nature. Sometimes when you can't get out into actual nature, it can be nearly as beneficial to watch nature, either watching in something like this, even looking at photography of nature. All of those things have been studied and found to be beneficial for mental health. We know the health benefits of forest bathing, and for those not familiar, forest bathing is a term that is directly translated from the Japanese term Shinrin-yoku, and it's a practice that involves just going out into nature, taking nature in through the senses in a very quiet, calm, contemplative, and slow way. And this practice has been found to have a whole host of mental and physical health benefits, things from reducing stress hormones in your saliva, boosting the immune system through activating the natural killer cells in the body. Natural killer cells have been found to remain elevated in both number and level of activity for as long as 30 days out from spending time out in nature in this way. Forest bathing has also been found to improve blood pressure and pulse and heart rate variability, and numerous studies on forest bathing have shown benefits in terms of mental health. So, as you've all been waiting, we're going to get to the TikTok trend. So again, those are all some of my just common go-tos of ways to use trails and ways to prescribe trails to people. But if anybody's been on social media recently, you will find that there are all kinds of other new ideas. I'm curious if anyone here heard about hot girl walks this summer, because this was all over social media. So the hot girl walk, you're going to laugh, but this is what it takes to do the hot girl walk. Okay, so it's a 4-mile walk. Let me back up. It's a 4-mile walk, and you're supposed to do nothing but think of 3 things. Thing number 1, things that you're grateful for. Number 2, your goals and how you want to achieve them. And 3, how hot you are. So, we do know that expressing gratitude is good for us. Studies have found that feeling thankful improves our sleep, our mood, and our immunity. Gratitude has been found to, of course, decrease depression, anxiety, even chronic pain, and to improve other kinds of disease and risk of disease. So there probably is something to the hot girl walk. So if you haven't tried it yet, I strongly recommend it. All you got to do, think about things you're grateful for, your goals and how you're going to get them, and how hot you are. All right, speed hiking. So I'll tell you a little personal story today. I was sure that this webinar today started at noon Pacific. And then suddenly I saw my Zoom invite said 1 o'clock Pacific, and I couldn't believe it. So I checked everything. I checked time zones. I checked whether we've had daylight savings time or not, which we haven't. That's this coming weekend. I wasn't sure, but suddenly I finally convinced myself that no, it actually started at 1 o'clock Pacific, which guess what? That gave me a whole hour with nothing to do. So I took myself on a speed hike. I'm about 4 blocks from a nature trail on a mountain, and I took myself on a speed hike. It was kind of a combination of a hike and a trail run, and I was able to fit it in because I had that bonus hour of time today. And that's something I do try to do pretty regularly. If I find myself with an extra little hour of time here or there, I'll figure out how to fit some time outdoors in, whether it's a bike ride or a hike or a run or something. And so often my patients tell me they just don't have time to exercise. They just don't have time to get outside, et cetera, et cetera. And we all have all the reasons why we can't, or it's difficult, but I'm here to say you can, and just find the moments and make it happen. So of course, speed hiking has benefits in terms of cardiovascular health. The current recommendations, as you may be aware, are that humans try to get 150 minutes of exercise per week. We know now that it doesn't all have to be in 30-minute increments. You can go out for a 10-minute walk, and as long as you get to your 150 minutes minimum per week, you're going to notice the advantage or the benefits, and you're going to have improvements in cardiovascular health. So fit it in, even if it's just a little speed hike or a speed walk. Also, studies have looked at outdoor exercise versus indoor exercise. They found that walking or running or hiking or jogging outdoors, as opposed to in a gym indoors on a treadmill, can have a greater effect on boosting creativity, coming up with new ideas. So if you're ever pondering a question or a problem or something to that effect, or something like trying to come up with a topic for an essay or something, or a new idea at work, getting outdoors as opposed to exercise on a treadmill can help increase your new ideas, boost creativity. Here's another TikTok trend this summer, the soft hiking. So I think through all trails, I'm constantly asked to weigh in on these various trends and the health benefits of them. And so over the course of the summer, first it was hot girl walk, then it was slow walking, then silent walking, then soft hiking. And it's just a constant, kind of back and forth of do it fast, do it hard, do it slow, do it softly, do it silently. And I get a kick out of that. And yet, of course, there is some wisdom in all of these different ways of enjoying time outdoors. So soft, silent, slow, whatever you want to call it, of course, has benefits to our mental health. I think about social media and I think about the devices that we're on. It's tempting when you get a 5, 10, 20 minute, hour-long break to spend it scrolling on your phone. And I think that tends to be a go-to for people. There's been some recent, very interesting studies and articles on the subject of the dopamine surge. And we think of dopamine as the feel-good hormone, and that when we do things like binging on Netflix or on social media or binging on food or anything that we tend to do to excess, the previous thought was that dopamine is the feel-good hormone that surges when we do that thing. Interestingly, they're now starting to realize that it's not necessarily the feel good, because it doesn't always feel good, right? After you binge on something, you realize you've wasted an hour of your life mindlessly doing something that you could have maybe been doing something more productive with, or you drink too much alcohol, or you eat too much cake, or all of those things. You don't really feel good afterwards, right? So they've realized that dopamine may not so much be the feel-good hormone as it is the I want more hormone. And an interesting thing has been found that if you can break the cycle, if you can interrupt the repetition of the thing, whether it's scrolling or binge eating or drinking alcohol or whatever it is, if you can swap out, if you can take a break between 5 and 20 minutes, you can break that cycle of I want more dopamine hit. So what better a thing to do to break that cycle? Or if your kids are stuck in a mindless, endless scrolling on social media, or maybe too much video games or TV or whatever it is, maybe urging them to get outdoors for a little walk, a brief hike, time outdoors, time just gazing in nature, sitting, forest bathing, whatever, bird watching, walking the dog, any of those things are perfect for breaking that cycle. And you might notice, try this next time you find yourself in one of those little ruts. You might find that if you do take 5 or 20 minutes, that the urge to have another one or to continue scrolling or continue whatever it is often goes away. I find that very, very interesting. Time in nature, of course, also boosts self-esteem and reduces things like anxiety and depression. So all of these are good reasons to do a slow, silent, or soft hike in nature. I've also seen on social media this notion of sense hacking. I find that kind of funny, whatever sense hacking is. But it's the idea of, similar to forest bathing, just taking it in through the senses. So I will often tell people, when you're outdoors, try to be in the moment, try to notice what you notice. And a simple little game for that is to try to, so 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, look for 5 things that you can see, 4 things that you can hear, 3 things you can touch, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. Be careful on the taste one, but if it's edible or tasteable, and it might just be raindrops, it might be tasting the air, but just noticing the senses in that way. The moment you've been waiting for, rage hiking. So this is an article that was just published last week in the Business Insider, and I was quoted in this article. Hence the topic for this entire webinar came from these things. Rage walking helped me move through my anger. So anyone here ever tried rage hiking? I would bet that maybe somebody has. Be curious. So drop your answers in the chat. So here is a social media post, kind of funny. This guy says, going for a stupid hike in stupid nature for my stupid mental health and loving every minute of it. So, I guess when I think about it, I find that many people are having a rough time right now. There's a lot of division in politics and social spheres. I think a lot of people are frustrated, angry, hurting. There's economic unrest. We've been through a pandemic. We're still dealing with all of that and the repercussions. And so finding an outlet is important for all of us, as opposed to keeping our emotions bottled up. Anytime that we can channel some physical activity, get out into nature, get some benefits, helps, I think, among other things, to create some perspective, to get a sense of the size and scope of our problems relative to the universe, to nature, to the size of the redwoods, to all kinds of things in our environment. And when we get outside, sometimes it can be helpful in that way. So if you're heading out on a rage hike, say you've had a rough day at work, or maybe had a disagreement with your partner or your teenagers or whatever, what would a rage hike look like? Be curious to hear what you all are thinking as we're pondering this. But I imagine that my rage hike might start out at a faster pace, might start out with listening to music. In fact, my music might start out being a little bit, faster paced, maybe loud with headphones. I might even, once I was out in the middle of nowhere, let out a little of my aggression, let off a little steam, might even yell, shout, whatever. That's kind of what I envision in a rage hike. And yet, over the course of time, perhaps my tempo would slow, perhaps my music would soften a bit, perhaps I would start to notice my surroundings and things would start to feel a little bit okay. There was a study, in fact, that looked at the idea of rumination. So rumination is when we're just stuck in our thoughts, just an endless cycle of thoughts. And this study looked at people who spent 90 minutes outdoors walking in nature as opposed to in an urban setting, and found that those who walked in nature had less rumination, that they self-reported, less of that just continuous spinning thoughts. And also they put these people in a functional MRI machine and found that they had less activity in the part of the brain in the subgenual prefrontal cortex of the brain up front here, the area that actually deals with rumination. So they found that those people who had been outdoors for 90 minutes in nature had less rumination showing up on functional MRI scans. So there's got to be something to this idea of the rage hike. So, if nothing else, get a breath of fresh air. So all that considered, let's just reset on the trendiness of it all. It doesn't matter if you slow hike, speed hike, rage hike, hot girl walk, whatever it is, or if you just enjoy nature in this way, in a quiet, contemplative way. Use your imagination, and whichever way you choose to enjoy nature, it's good for you. So with that, I wanted to mention, in the spirit of social media, I would love, and Semper Virens Fund would love, that if you are inspired by any of the ideas we talked about today, tag us on social media and let us know about your coffee hike or walking the dog or any of the different things we talked about today. And with that, I will stop.
Thank you so much, Suzanne. I find it really ironic that screens seem to be behind this new interest in getting out and interacting in nature in different ways. That just seems funny to me. But
it is funny. Yeah, go ahead.
But if it works, right? I mean,
right.
Whatever it takes to get people to get outdoors. You touched on this a little bit when you talked about how difficult times have been in recent years, how much conflict there is in the world, or challenges.
Right.
But I'm wondering what else you think is behind these emerging trends, these many emerging trends relating to getting outdoors. Do you think it's
Yeah.
just social media, or you think it's a growing awareness of the benefits of being outdoors?
I think some of all of it. I think that, as people are more indoors and more attached to their devices and disconnected from other people and disconnected from nature, that at some point we have a longing and a need, and it's inherent, it's integral. We evolved in nature for the past several thousand years, and it's only been within the last 200 years that we've increasingly been indoors so much, and increasingly, only the last 20 years, 10 in some ways, 5 years, it's really not a very long time in the scheme of
Yeah.
human history that we've had these little devices that we carry around. And so I do think that we have a knowing, an inner knowing, that we need to be outdoors. And as soon as we remember it and we try it again, it just floods right back that this is what we need to be whole, to be healthy. I often joke that it's funny to me that I have to talk about these studies
Yeah.
about,
People just need to
right,
experience it and be reminded.
right. And yet when people hear that there is research to support the benefits of being out in nature, then it validates it. It's not just child's play. It's not just playing outside. I think we have this sense sometimes that, well, I should go to the gym. I should exercise. I should do this. I should do that. I should prioritize self-care and mental health and all of these things that I should do. But it doesn't have to be so difficult. And we don't have to penalize ourselves or be so hard on ourselves if we take an hour out of our day to go walk on a trail.
Yeah. Yeah.
It,
We saw during COVID, and you mentioned your own experience. I know this was true for me, that because it was one of the few things you could do and feel safer, a lot of people started going back outdoors. And I'm wondering if you think those, setting aside how people are going outdoors and whether they're rage walking or hot walking, are we still seeing increases in people going outdoors, or is that dropped back down after COVID?
Yeah, I haven't recently talked to trail managers, but what I heard earlier on is that initially there was a big surge in the early weeks of COVID of trail usage and parks usage, but then it did start to decline over time. We joke, my husband and I, that you can tell when football season is on because the trails are empty on Sunday afternoons and things like that. But in the early days of COVID, there was nothing for people to do, and so they did go outside. I find it unfortunate that when we have things to do, like watching, and of course we all love watching football, we all love all of these things, but everything in moderation. We need to get out also, and it's good for us.
One thing that you didn't touch on, and you may not be able to answer this, you talked about some of the different trends and how people are getting out into nature, but how does the canvas upon which you're doing your experience affect the impacts? Meaning, what's the difference to somebody like me who goes walking in a redwood forest versus the desert, on a rainy day versus a sunny day? Are there different benefits to different kinds of trails
Totally.
and different kinds of days?
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's all good.
Yeah.
It's all good. There is something extra good, extra magical about spending time in coniferous forest. So to me,
of course, this audience agrees with that.
Right. And to be among the majestic redwoods is the icing on the cake that, people all around the world would give anything to have that experience. And I talk to people all the time who it's on their bucket list to see the redwoods. And so to be able to be in their midst on a regular basis is the best of the best. And we do know that there are tremendous health benefits to being among the redwoods or other types of pine or coniferous forest, because they really strongly emit those volatile oils that you smell when you're in there, the pine, the, you know, the juniper, whatever. And those essential oils emit phytoncides, which I think we got into in our last talk. And so I won't get far into the weeds on that, but the phytoncides are chemicals that plants emit that confer health benefits to the plant by helping the plant fend off bacteria and viruses and fungus. But we know that when we inhale those essential oils, if you're smelling a plant, you're inhaling the essential oils from that plant. If you're smelling pine, you're breathing in the essential oils and the phytoncides, and you also are deriving those health benefits in terms of not only microbes like bacteria, fungus, and viruses, but they've been found to help to boost the natural killer or NK cells in the body, which helps our immune system. So yes, the redwoods are the best, but you get that from anywhere outdoors.
Well, so I think I'm hearing you say the awe-inspiring and sort of perspective making of something like a redwood, you could get that similarly, I would imagine, in the mountains, certain mountains, or in the Grand Canyon or Death Valley, where there's a lot less vegetation in some cases.
Definitely.
So is it the plant-based component, or can you get equal benefit from being, say, in an arid climate where there isn't as much vegetation?
Yes, there is such a great paper that was published in 2015. The last name of the author is Kuo, Kuo. Her first name was Ming, Ming. And if anybody's interested in this, either Matt Schaefer can quickly search it and put it in the chat. But it was a paper looking at all the reasons that nature affects health. And in her paper, it all was distilled down, in her opinion, and by the research that she called, to improving the immune system. And I think that's so fascinating. So the things that I just mentioned, improve the immune system, but also the factors that you just mentioned of experiencing the sense of awe and wonder. There is even a link between that and boosting the immune system. So all of these different things in nature, whether it's staring at a mountain peak, or staring or watching the waves crash at the ocean, or walking in the desert. I mean, the smell of the desert is unlike anything anywhere else. Looking at the saguaro cacti, which are also awe-inspiring when you ponder the fact that it takes 100 years on average to grow an arm on a saguaro cactus, and many of them have all kinds of arms and have been there for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. So yes, there are all kinds of different reasons, and different places have different health benefits. So there's actually a nature pyramid. I don't know if I talked about that before, but this idea that, kind of like the food pyramid, that if we try to have on a regular basis little close experiences with nature, including in our backyard or maybe a neighborhood park, so every day or several times a week, we should try to have those nearby nature experiences. Then maybe once a month, we should try to go to a state park or a state forest or somewhere within our region that would be a little bit different of a type of a nature experience. And then maybe hopefully once a year or twice a year, we could travel to a national park or a beach, or to see the redwoods, and to have that type of nature experience. And I just love that idea.
Yeah, it sounds like you may get different benefits from different experiences,
Right.
but they all bring something to your life and your longevity.
Absolutely.
Well, I know we are running out of time, and I want to give my colleague Matt a chance to share with us any questions that we've gotten from the audience. I have plenty more questions if we don't have any, but I will always want to make time to hear what they're thinking about. So Matt, anything you want to share with us?
We've had a robust dialogue and a lot of sharing of great ideas. A couple ideas came up around mental health in a different way. One was complex PTSD and improvements in that, in getting out in nature. And the other is grief and resolving or facing or addressing grief through time in nature. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that.
Well, of course I can. So I may have shared this in our last webinar. The reason I came to find that nature is healing as a person who started my career in OBGYN and then ultimately integrative medicine was that after my husband passed away in 2012, I found that my personal healing took place outdoors in nature. And so I am right here as a personal, attestation of the healing benefits of time in nature for dealing with grief. And it's something that I have spoken about in depth quite a bit, and and that I share with others in working through their own cycles of grief. In terms of nature and forest therapy, you can seek out a nature and forest therapy guide online through the Association of Nature and Forest Therapy. And there are a number of certified guides who predominantly work in these areas of grief and PTSD and mental health and all kinds of other, groups based on a particular illness, survivors of cancer, LGBTQ groups, etc. And so I think, we didn't get into that specifically, but finding your tribe, there are now so many different organizations that involve hiking and various groups and communities. And so Google what you're looking for and hiking in your area. And I think people would be surprised and amazed at what's out there. And if you see that there is an organization, but you don't have a chapter near you, start one, because I'm willing to bet that there are other people going through what you're going through who would love nothing more than to have a community like this.
One other area that I was just thinking about as you were talking is that we didn't touch upon is sort of spiritual, religious practices, formal or informal rites of passage, that so much of which is connected to being outdoors, engaging with nature, whether it's literally a religious pilgrimage that takes you on a long multi-day walk somewhere, or more informally, a family that says when you're 16, we take this skyline to the sea 3-day hike together.
Yeah.
I think there's a whole additional sort of
absolutely
suite of meaning around experiencing nature.
People have been doing things like that throughout time.
Yeah. Vision quest. It goes back to
absolutely
many
yes.
indigenous practices, I think. Anyway, sorry, Matt. Do you have other questions?
Well, I just wanted to note a couple other ideas that came up. Of course, were night walking and getting out and hiding your senses in the dark walking,
right.
Geocaching
Yes.
as an activity to do out in nature, which I've had the chance to do as well. It's a lot of fun. There was a question about incentivizing people to get outdoors. I thought it'd be an interesting way to, and the questions from the audience, wondering if you've been seeing any differences, particularly cultural or ethnic or socioeconomic differences in incentivizing people to get outdoors, especially for the first time.
Yeah, well, All Trails, as you mentioned, I'm involved with, is doing a lot of work in this regard and trying to make nature and access to trails and access to parks available to everyone. So inclusivity regarding all kinds of special needs, mobility, and then for groups that have felt marginalized or have felt that nature, time outdoors was not accessible to them. And so, yes, absolutely. I think there are all kinds of organizations working very hard at that, including Semper Virens Fund, I happen to know.
All right, well, we could ask you a lot more questions, but we are out of time. And so I just want to thank you, Suzanne. I know we will have you back because this area of discussion is so directly pertinent to the mission of Semper Virens and the work that we try to do. So thank you for sharing these new trends. Some of them I hadn't even heard of till you brought them up. And I especially like the rage hiking. I'm sure I will have occasion to do that.
Yes.
And be cognizant that that's what I'm doing. But thank you. Thank you for sharing your insights. Thank you for proselytizing on behalf of the benefits of nature, and especially the Redwoods. And to our audience, thank you for joining us. This is the last in our series for the calendar year. We will be taking a bit of a hiatus, and then we'll start up again with a new series in 2024. But in the meantime, you can watch this. This is going to be posted on our website and YouTube channel, and you can stay in touch with us through the web, email, social media, including, as of, I think, just recently, TikTok. So keep track of what we're doing, keep track of what Suzanne is doing. And thank you again to Scharf Investments for sponsoring this Under the Redwoods webinar series for 2023. We really appreciate their support. So thanks, and we'll look forward to seeing all of you at our next Under the Redwoods webinar series in January.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks.
Fun as always. Tag
Take
us
care.
with your walks.
Yes, exactly. Keep us posted on what you end up doing. Thanks. All right. Bye-bye.